Hello everybody, welcome to the Future of Retail Marketing for Customer Engagement webinar 2020. This is a retail bulletin event and is sponsored by RedEye. We are an AI-driven marketing automation platform, and this webinar is webinar number 4, and we're going to put a spotlight on how to use customer data to drive engagement. My name's Andy Stockwell. I'm Chief Commercial Officer at RedEye. I've been working with data for 20 years, specifically around how to get more engagement and value out of customers. We've got an excellent panel here today with lots of ideas and experience from across retail. So Hilary James, Brand and Marketing Director at Forever Unique, Emily Laws, Senior Marketing Manager at Lucky Saint, and Andrew Mann, formerly Head of Insight and Loyalty at M&S. So first of all, we're going to go through a few slides to set the scene and get everybody thinking about data. Data should always be the starting point and guide every decision we make, from the creative of a campaign to the segmentation and personalization across the customer life cycle. Only then can we create truly engaging customer experiences and stop getting lost and distant from our customers. The more we understand about our customer with the data we hold, the better stories and personalized experiences we can create for them. The more personalized the experience, the greater the engagement and revenue for our brand. So what are the steps to harnessing the data and creating these customer engagements? So taking a data-first approach means mapping out what we know about the customers at each stage of the customer life cycle, helping us understand the data that we hold at each of the stages and how that deepens as there's more engagement and more purchases are made. Most importantly, it's about understanding where in the business is this data. Is it siloed in particular areas, or is it all in one place in a single platform ready to action? Once we have this top level understanding, we should question what else we want to know about the data. You know, what do we need to use to create an effective targeting and personalization plan? That might be, where do we need to know what products somebody's bought, or what particular sizes does a customer have? What is our objective as a brand for these segments? We understand who they are and the behaviors, but how do we influence them to get to the next step? And probably most importantly of all, there's no point measuring all of this unless we're going to take action from it. So finally, we need to pull all of our learnings from the data into a segmentation plan so that we can activate it across our channels. So as of 23rd of March, I think everyone will agree that everything changed. We saw and are seeing a seismic shift in consumer attitudes, habits and behaviours. And we as marketers have been forced to change everything that we previously knew. And that is even more important about our customers. They are all behaving completely differently to they were prior to that date. So we've seen lots of new behaviours and customer types. So here's a few examples. So first of all, brand new customers. We work with many businesses who've had over 1,000% year-on-year increase in new customers. And many of those customers are completely different to the customers that we had prior to lockdown, both in their behaviours, what they're buying and how they're buying it. There's also previous in-store shoppers who have now been driven online. So this is a completely new experience for them, even though they were very, very used to the brand that they're purchasing from. And there's lockdown VIPs. So many people, their disposable income has actually increased significantly during lockdown, as they've saved money on things like commuting and eating out. So taking a look at this first of all for a previous store shopper as an example. So first of all, we break that down and understand what were they doing prior to lockdown and what are they doing today, so we can start to map out what their interest and activity is. And most importantly, it's really looking at what they're doing now to get that hand raised for what they're most interested in. Next, we want to look at what else do we want to know about them. So where can we add more data and more insight to really understand how we can target these people more effectively? So in this example, we're adding, some more customer preference data. having a look at how far away they are from a store using drive time insights, and maybe also using predictive models to understand what are they most likely to do next. So even though we have all this data, to understand which parts of the data we want to use, we have to put it into a personalization segmentation strategy. And then we need to understand what do we want to automate, so we can put in automated programs so that our people can focus on the next stages of the journey. From here, let's have a look at some examples of what retailers are doing today. So first of all, using store and drive time data. So here's a few examples that have been used as stores have started to reopen. The Lakeland example is pulling in nicely what that local store is. And then we're also having some offers for particular examples of store purchases. Something that we've seen a number of brands not do during this period, which are real missed opportunities, is using that browsing behaviour to target them with imagery that's related to that. So particularly things like, you know, big ticket spends, where you could encourage someone to come in and have a look and a feel of that product when they're coming back into store. Site browsing and purchase data has been especially important during lockdown. As those purchase patterns have changed so much, we're able to really look at what are those people looking at now and target them accordingly. And now that stores are starting to open up, we're seeing people starting to revert back and look at the categories that people were browsing pre-lockdown, so we can encourage them to make some more of those sorts of purchases again. Customer preference is another one that we can look at. You can almost throw away the preferences from pre-lockdown, as everything has changed so much. So here's a good example of using self-segmentation to look at what are people interested in, what are they doing right now? And then once somebody's clicked through on this, you can essentially use that engagement to follow up with communication really relevant to what they've selected. Looking at average order value, loyalty and predictive data next. So this Boots example is a really good example of spend stretch, where encouraging people to spend a higher amount to get reward points once they've come into store. Similarly on the points for people coming into store and using an app. Predictive adds to this, as you're able to target people based on what you think they're most likely to next do. This final example is looking at probably a younger demographic where they've browsed for a particular product, but then using contextual data to understand where are they right now. They might be on the move, so using that contextual data on their location to show them a store that's close to them, so they can potentially click and collect or pop into store to purchase. So hopefully that's given everyone a good flavour of the discussion. So now can I welcome back the panel? Let's give everyone a minute to turn their videos back on.
Are we all switched on?
Hello, great. Yeah, welcome back, guys. So great. So first of all, to kick us off, could everyone please introduce themselves and then share with us some of the ways that you've been targeting and segmenting customers differently since lockdown? Who'd like to go first?
I can go first. So I'm Emily. I am Senior Marketing Manager at Lucky Saint. We are an alcohol-free lager brand. And lockdown has been a really interesting time for us. I actually only started at the company the day before the UK went into lockdown. So before this period, we weren't really using data in a big way. We were primarily on-trade business, and we didn't really use our e-commerce platform much. It was more of a nice to have. So during lockdown, segmentation and understanding our consumers online has been a huge part of how we've pivoted from losing 70% of our volume when all the bars and restaurants shut to ending up having our best ever month in April. So it's been a massive learning curve and a huge wake-up call for us that e-commerce is not just a nice to have, it's now going to be a really important part of our business.
Great.
I'll go next. I'm Hill. You'll see me on screen as Hill James, but if you're perhaps looking for me on LinkedIn or something, I'm also Hilary Large. Don't worry, I'm not running two identities. It's just that this webinar is appearing through my Google Mail account, so you're seeing Hilary James. But so I'm the brand and marketing director of a mid-sized premium fashion brand called Forever Unique. You might know our owner. Her name is Seema, and she appears on the Real Housewives of Cheshire programme. So, you know, no judgment here. If you watch the show, then you'll know Seema. So we've had a real difficult time over COVID. So as we went into lockdown, obviously all the occasions that our customers would usually dress for, we sell a lot of occasion wear, disappeared off the face of the earth. So proms, weddings, graduations, races, holidays, dinners, nights out were all kind of cleared away. And that meant that we needed to use data to try to work out how we could pivot our customers into a different type of product. And also data through our supply chain about how quickly and how readily we could get that product, because we didn't have a supply chain that was used to bringing that product through. So that was a really interesting challenge for us. We are still pivoting and changing, and we are getting there. There are some green shoots, but it's been really tough.
Andrew, how about yourself?
Hello there. Hi, everyone. My name's Andrew Mann. Introduced as formerly Insight Loyalty Director of Marks and Spencer's, but actually I've worked in retail for the last 15 years. I was the club card director at Tesco for 5 years, ran Insight to Loyalty at Sainsbury's for 4 years, was the customer director of the Co-op, and have spent some time at Asda running as VP of pricing and CRM and loyalty. And I've just spent a year with Marks and Spencer's helping them redesign their Sparks card, which launched this week. So get your Sparks, go and have a check out the new Sparks card. So I've got lots of experience in retail and data-driven insight and CRM and how best to use data. And I pivoted back in December to set my own, leave retail and go and set my own business up. And so I've had a really interesting time of setting a new business up in a time of COVID. So first couple of months was fine. And then since March, I've been working with actually most of the big grocery retailers to help them understand how they can survive this new change in their business, because it's been some ups and some downs and massive change for their colleagues as well as their customers. And they're thinking about how they pivot in terms of moving forward. Because again, a lot of grocery retailers have got lots of new customers, but actually it's a bit like a piece of elastic. You stretch a piece of elastic in this change, and the bit they're trying to work out is how much of the elastic goes back to where it was before and how much of it goes into something, and how do they move out of this health crisis we're in into the economic crisis we're about to come into. So that's what I've been doing. That's what I've been working through, is how do they help them survive, and then how do we think about revival as we're going forward. But very data driven, insight driven in that sort of area. So hello.
Brilliant, thank you all. Yeah, so we've got a really good mix of different size businesses, both on the panel and in everybody that's watching. So probably the next question to ask you all, with the use of data in different size businesses, how have things really changed, and how have we used different size budgets during this period? So maybe if we start with more of a startup business then, Emily, so how did you guys find things when everything's first kicked off?
Yeah, I mean, it was, we're in the lucky position that we have a small team and we only have one product at the moment. So we were able to kind of act quite quickly because there weren't too many moving parts. And almost with the on-trade shutting down, we've been allowed to kind of focus on D2C e-commerce over the last 3 months. So I think one of the best pieces of advice that I got at the beginning of lockdown, which I've been sharing with everyone ever since, is use what you've got and work with what you already have. I think that especially for startups, data can feel like a really intimidating word, and it feels like something you have to spend lots of money on, and it feels like something that big businesses have, not that startups have, and that's just not true. There's so much data around you that you have access to that you might not necessarily be seeing as data. So using our Shopify site, which previously, again, was a nice to have, using our Amazon account and looking at the analytics on there. Even Google, you know, we, in our own kind of little bubble, felt that maybe people were starting to drink more during the beginning of lockdown, but we actually found from lots of press articles that 1 in 3 people were looking to moderate or even stop drinking as lockdown went on, and to kind of have healthier habits and almost protect their mental health while in lockdown. So we used a lot of that information, and what we also did was kind of use data across different channels. We didn't kind of get too obsessed, for example, with the data from Facebook and only look at that. So as an example, we took the data that we had from Sainsbury's, because we're one of their future brands, and we learned that our consumers are real kind of home chefs, which was obviously a brilliant insight considering that everyone was at home. So we pivoted all of our content away from the kind of slick, very brand heavy content that we had before, and we focused on things like recipes. We partnered with lots of our restaurant partners who obviously had a lot of time on their hands at that time, to create recipes to recreate your favorite restaurant dishes at home. And we ended up converting our CRM journey from literally converting no sales, because we were communicating with people maybe once every 3 months, to communicating every 2 weeks with great at-home recipes, and our conversion rate on our CRM emails went up by over 1,000%. So it was a small change, and it was a small data insight, but I think the importance of acting on data, rather than just thinking, oh, that's interesting, is really, really important in a startup environment.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I completely concur. The changes in data, especially how different channels have responded during this period, have been immense. So how about for larger businesses? What sort of different challenges have we seen there?
So for us, we went, so if I just go back to January and February, we felt we knew our customer well. We didn't have a wealth of data. Some of it was very hard to get to, but we instinctively knew how she dressed, and we got a lot of visual feedback through Facebook as to how she dressed as well. And we also had 2 very distinct channels. So we had a B2C channel, which is our e-commerce website on Magento 1, which has been problematic, and we're currently coming off Magento and transitioning. And we had a big B2B business, which was selling through effectively agents into Europe and further afield, who would then sell our product into high-end boutiques in places like Greece, Portugal, Spain, etc. And what we found was, and we would get data back from our agents as well in terms of which styles were selling, which we would need to repeat on. But as of lockdown, our B2B model basically died. Those boutiques all closed, those agents stopped working on our behalf pretty much overnight. And we realized that that model would need to pivot very quickly into something else, and that we would need to make sure that the mainstay of our business was our B2C e-commerce website. So very quickly, we needed to mobilize quite a bit of data about what our customers were now wearing, and why there was some retrenchment from our product, which seems obvious, but we did quite a lot of survey work through emails, just asking, and I'm talking about easy stuff here, really, Survey Monkey stuff, not really special stuff, just asking about what are you wearing, what are your needs going to be, how is your life changing. So we did a bit of that, and very quickly we reassured ourselves that our hypotheses were correct and that our customer was not going to need much occasion wear for quite some time. So we then started to plan a way forward that would allow us to bring in some loungewear, a premium loungewear, which was not easy to source, and allow us to pivot our entire product proposition, really. So for autumn, winter, and through into spring, summer next year, which I'm planning, and even autumn, winter of 21, which I'm starting to look at, we will now not be a mainstay occasion wear business. We will have that business, but the data is telling us that we need to be a ready to wear business, premium still, but to really minimize our exposure on those really long gowns, because we just don't know when that business, if ever, will come back in the way that it's been.
Brilliant, impressive change there in such a short period. Andrew, what have you seen?
Well, I think if you look at the grocery market, it's a very different challenge around where we need to get to. And to put into context, 30% of the calories we consume are in food service and hospitality, which disappeared overnight. And actually people didn't stop eating anything less. So the grocers had to deal with a 30% growth in their business, literally in a sort of overnight, which is a great problem to have. But what it did do is it created other challenges in terms of what you needed to get to. And I think the first thing that the grocers have sort of focused on was, look, let's get really clear on the problem we're trying to solve. Okay, what is it we're trying to do here? Because actually there's a logistics challenge around how do you get the product into there, but actually focusing on the problem you're trying to solve is the most important thing to do. And they realized, we did some work with quite a few of the retailers to actually help them, first of all, understand what is it that drives their choice of where people are going to go and get their food from. And most people have got a choice of a couple of different retailers. So what was important to them, and it used to be price and quality of food is the major drivers, but actually availability became important. And one thing that had never become very important around cleanliness was actually almost one of the biggest drivers of stores. So do you remember when we, within a few weeks afterwards, you started seeing the grocery retailers advertising how they were managing social distancing in stores and how they were reducing their ranges so that they could be available of the things that you wanted was much more important as a driver. And that came out of getting very clear on how do you understand what the drivers are, which is data driven. And I think it's getting clear on the problem was the most important thing, and then solving those problems one at a time. And one of the biggest outcomes I think a lot of people have seen is they're not trying to answer every problem now. When you have the problems the size of the scale that we've had previously, like you have no business or you have double your business, you have to all of a sudden reprioritize dramatically and actually have fewer priorities that you're going to work on. So most of the grocery retailers, we had, when I was at Sainsbury's or Tesco, you had 100 IT priorities. You ended up having 5, So how do we double the amount of grocery home delivery deliveries we can do? Double it. We all want to get it to 3 times that, but how do we double it very quickly? And doing something as simple as saying, getting rid of bottled water means you can add 10% to your capacity, because it's the weight of the lorries that deliver it, is one of those very simple solutions that increase their capacity by 10%. Didn't cost anything, but it grew the capacity quite a lot. So you start thinking about defining the problem, simplifying those problems, and then working through them in a sort of very logical data-based approach, which is irrelevant for a big organization as well as a small one. It's very similar to what Emily and Hilary have been talking about as well, just at a bigger scale.
Very true. I think making those sorts of changes that you've each made, in a period where actually many of your teams will have been working from home, adds an additional challenge for that. So, we talk a lot about working from home now, and obviously there's a lot of conversation about many businesses doing a lot more of it in the future. How has that created extra challenges, and how are you using data differently with teams based at home?
We've had quite a good system set up for our team, in the sense that immediately we went into lockdown. Unfortunately, we had to furlough most of our team, but the core team who remained and were trying to run the business was about 5 or 6 of us really. And we were able to quite quickly develop a way where we could pull data every day. It was a cobble together, I won't lie, but we pulled together a system for extracting data out of Magento on a daily basis and pulling that through into a very basic spreadsheet, because we couldn't access what we normally accessed in the office. But that allowed us to see, cover, stock cover. It allowed us to look at bestsellers and allowed us to very quickly see what was selling. So that helped us to get back into things that were selling. So for example, we started selling knitwear like we'd never sold it before, but very sort of sloppy Joe shapes of knitwear, not critical fit knitwear. And so immediately we could see via our everyday Zoom calls where we shared this Magento extract that we needed to keep the supply of that really, really tight, and we needed to keep repeating on it interestingly, the supplier for those particular lines then came back to us and said, right, well, everybody is wanting knitwear. Everybody wants that shape of knitwear. So we're now going to limit your supply because it's so, you know, it's going to be kind of on a first come, first serve basis. And I'm not going to give you all that I've got. But the good thing about having that data out of Magento on a daily basis was we could go to him very quickly and say, right, we want to secure another 300 units of that product. And we'll pay for it now, because interestingly, suppliers also changed their payment terms. So they wanted payment by credit card straight away. So that was a cash flow implication, but we had to do it. But it was great because we shared the knowledge quickly, shared that knowledge with our supplier, and we were able to pull in the stock very quickly. So that was, it was quick, very reactive, not rich in any way, very blunt, but it allowed us to get the stock that we needed.
I think we had a similar experience, that actually working from home has made us a lot more efficient in sharing data and turning it into action. I think that, first of all, we've all had a lot more time, which has meant that we've been able to attend webinars, we've been able to have quick 20-minute Zoom conversations with other people in our industry, and there was a lot of data sharing at the beginning of lockdown, which was amazing. And where normally you would maybe arrange a coffee, you would spend half an hour getting there, you know, 20 minutes waiting for your coffee to arrive and then traveling back, and it took up a big chunk of your day. We were able to have kind of 20-minute power chats with other people in the industry and shared some really useful information. And we were always set up to work online. We've always used Google Drive as our server, but we've got a lot better now at sharing data in an actionable way. So rather than kind of doing massively long reports or just sharing decks with people, we've got in a really great habit of giving very top line information. And I think that, you know, our MD, Emma, who comes from an FMCG background and a much bigger, kind of more corporate background, is all about data, insight, action. And she's really instilled that in us during lockdown. So actually working from home has been a massively positive thing for us. It's made us a lot more efficient, and you can't really have those situations that you do in the office where everyone goes into a meeting room, there's a bit of chit chat, it kind of, you know, goes on and it's a bit of a brainstorm, but there's no real point to it. I think when you're at home and when everybody's on a Zoom call, you make it a lot more focused. So I found it to be really positive, and for the foreseeable future, we're not planning on going back to an office. We're going to stay working from home for now.
Thank you. Andrew, how have you found things?
Well, look, I think it's very different. It's really interesting. I think, first of all, people have become a lot more focused in the same way that Emily's talked about. So meetings are shorter, much more specific. You've got more time because you're not commuting, which is a very obvious thing. But also, I'm working with a lot of clients that I've actually never met in a physical sort of perspective. But also I'm working with clients all over the world now. So I'm working with people in Australia as well as the UK. So it's sort of, all of a sudden, it changes where you're going to be working. And I think it's going to have quite a big impact in how people are going to be working, because you actually don't need to be based in London to work in London. You could be in, you know, Milan, Madrid, Paris if you wanted to. You could be anywhere in the world in terms of where you need to work. So I think, you know, it's changing dramatically the way people are working, but I think you've also got to balance that very focused, here we are with our work meetings, which can be very focused. At the same time, we've been having drinks with some of our clients where we literally, 4 or 5 of us will grab a beer at the end of the day and just have a drink and a chat. So you have to balance that socialness that I think you get with these sort of things, because if you don't get to know people. I mean, I've actually already, I know a lot about you, Andy, just from looking at what's behind you. I've learned an awful lot about people who, you know, what football team they support, just from looking at where they are as well. So I think, you know, in some respects, you can learn an awful lot about where you need to get to with, you know, kids coming into the background, or, you know, dogs and cats coming in as well. So I think in some respects, this working from home is, you learn an awful lot more about people than just, you know, coming to see them in a work office environment. So it's good and it's bad, I think. Yeah, but it's here to stay in a lot of respects.
Yeah, looking at our client base, we have a big mix. Some are back in the office already. Some will never go back into the office. So, you know, as a supplier, we've had to alter our processes so we can work with all those different ways of doing business.
Yeah.
So one definite that I know that we all agree on is that there is a recession coming. Some of us have worked through a recession before. So what do we all think will be different about this recession?
Shall I? We spent a lot of time thinking about what's going to happen in terms of this, and we did a lot of time looking before at what are the things emotionally customers have liked about the lockdown that we think could be one of those things that could stay, and there are some things that will stay. So there are digital conversion is improved. The way people are thinking about working is going to change in terms of those areas, and there's going to be some temporary changes around how we're going to have to react. But the long-term changes are sort of, this recessionary period is going to be like no other one, because it's going to be deeper and longer probably than most people have had. But some people are going to be pretty well off, and some people are going to go into nothing. But actually, most organizations understand how you can work within a recessionary period. So we know that customers will, people will be worried about money, or they'll be looking to trade down in some respects. They'll be looking to find, better offers in terms of where they need to get to as well. But at the same time, they'll be looking to treat themselves, and everything's very different. So you might be looking to save on one thing so you can spend on other things in terms of where you need to get to. But I think understanding the drivers of choice when you're going into a recession is going to be really important, and how they're changing. And so it's adapting continually and building that survival mechanism, and looking to ultimately, how do you give customers a reason to come into your shop? Because, and I think it's pretty consistent across all channels, is the basket size is about the same. It's the number of customers you have that changes in terms of where you need to get to. So you're going to continually having to think about recruiting new customers as others drop into it, and keeping your customer growth going where you need to get to, and giving them a reason, particularly in most areas, to come into the shop. So what's that one reason that you need to think about? And it's all about customer frequency and customer growth, I think, that you've got to be thinking about. Don't try for one deal. Think about, how do you give somebody a reason to come in and then come back, come in and come back, come in and come back.
I think for us, that idea of a treat occasion has massively changed, because now people are looking for a treat at the end of every day to kind of create a marker between the working from home and then your evening. Because normally in a normal, pre-COVID, you would go into work and then you would get the train home, you might go to the gym on the way home, you might meet a friend for a drink, and you kind of made that differentiation between your working day and your home life, whereas we don't have that as much now. And what we've definitely found, and I think one of the drivers for people buying Lucky Saint online, is that they want that treat occasion at the end of the day, but they don't really want to drink alcohol. They want to have that feeling of kind of relaxation when they have a beer. And with alcohol-free beer, one of the things that I always found really interesting, and again, an insight that we learned, was that you still get that dopamine hit with an alcohol-free beer if you associate the taste of beer with alcohol. So you still have that kind of moment when you have an alcohol-free beer, and that makes it perfect for lockdown or being at home, because you can mark that change between your working day, and you can have a beer, but without the guilt, without the calories, without the hangover. You can still get up and do a Zoom call at 8 o'clock in the morning, but it marks that treat occasion. But there's so many more treat occasions now, because I think we all feel like we deserve a bit more of a treat. And you're not having that wait till the end of the week, wait till Thirsty Thursday or Friday to go out for dinner. You're kind of needing that little acknowledgement of work coming to an end and your evening beginning. And I think that's something that we've talked quite a lot about in our comms, and even with our photography. We shot lots of photography during lockdown at photographers' homes. They did it remotely for us. And we shot lots of images of kind of a laptop in the background with a beer in the foreground, and kind of creating that occasion for people where they want a treat, but they don't want to suffer the consequences of an alcoholic treat.
And what we've noticed about our guys, interestingly, when we went into lockdown, our head of social very cleverly created a Facebook group, which we called #InItTogether. And we very quickly found a community of our VIP customers, our real bullseye customers of kind of 40 plus AB women with quite a high discretionary spend. And we've pulled those guys into this Facebook group, and there's now about 3,000 of them in there. I think we've just hit 3,000 today, actually. Interestingly, it kind of runs itself now, which is interesting in itself. But what we found was these customers are saying, we're still buying clothes. We don't know when we're going to wear them. We want loungewear and softer silhouettes, but we do know that we still want to buy stuff. We have still got income, either our own income or family-based income that is there. We are still going to spend money. And there was a lot of within this group, there was a lot of, I'm so happy to be in this group because I couldn't share on my main Facebook page how much money I'm spending during lockdown on clothes, treating myself. But in this group, I feel like I've got some sisters with me who are like-minded and are all spending money on clothes during lockdown. And so we found this group of women all sharing stuff, not just from Forever Unique, from lots of our competitors, Never Fully Dressed, people like that who are very much in our competitive set, saying, oh, look at that print, look at this dress, have you seen what they've got? And expressing that they felt that our In It Together group was the only place that they could talk about that because they felt too guilty in the outside world, but within that group they could share that they were spending. So we know that our customer is still spending and does not feel guilty in our group about it, but feels guilty externally. So, and we know she is probably now starting to think about an abroad holiday, and she is starting to think about what she might wear on the beach. And she probably has started to think about going out for dinner again. I would say our customer is one of the less bothered about social distancing kind of customers. And so she just wants to go out. She loves being out. She loves being glamorous and the moments of glamour for her. So we just have to find the right product to meet those needs. And it's great having that group because we can gently, not actively selling, obviously, but we can gently come to customers within that group and ask them about their ideas of what kind of apparel is going to suit. So that's been really helpful. So I think you're right, Emily, that these moments of treat are very much there. In your world, it's the non-alcohol beers at the end of the day to mark that pause. And in my world, it's, well, I still have some income and I'm going to go and I am going to buy some new clothes, even if I only wear them in the home and then take photos of myself and put them on Insta and within the Facebook group to show other people, I'm still going to do that.
I think you're right, Hilary, in terms of what's happening with the whole change, because this is a recession that's going to be like actually it's going to be very different to every other recession we've had, because it is a truly global recession that we're going into. So often you see in recessions you have other parts of the world are in different cycles of recessions. This is where we're going to see is almost a dip across every market in the world, be they developed markets in Western Europe or in North America or developing markets. Everyone's going to be dropping down a bit. So I think organizations are going to have to really think about effectively all the P's of the marketing mix. So they can't just think about dropping their price, because that's a recipe for disaster. They've got to think about the product and price combination. They've also got to think about how their new markets, your routes to market in terms of place, where are they selling, so new channels. And they're going to have to think about new ways of promoting, as you talked about. I've been working with a distillery up in Scotland. It's brilliant. I've never been there, but I feel like I know it very well. But they actually sell Glengoyne whiskey. So it's right in the middle of the Highlands. It takes 15 years to make, well, 10 to 15 years to make a Glengoyne whiskey. And a Glengoyne whiskey will cost about £40 just for a 10-year-old bottle. And they've got 50-year-old bottle they're going to be selling for £20,000. It's really premium whiskey. But actually what they've been doing is they've been running tastings. And they were getting, before lockdown, they were getting 10 people to a Facebook Live tasting. They're getting hundreds and hundreds of people to their Facebook Live testing. And they can send them a product, very small bottle of it as a £10 gift set. And then they'll have the distillers in the distillery up in Scotland, literally walking them around the distillery and showing what you need. So this idea of experiential sort of using social and all the new tools that are out there, but being true to what your brand is going to be one of those really important things. And then you can sell off the back of it as well. So I really like your idea of how you're using social to get people talking in a community. And this is what a lot of businesses are doing now. They're getting really clear on what their brand is, but thinking about using, you know, new channels for communication and new channels for distribution in terms of where we need to get to.
Yeah, thank you very much, guys. So yeah, really, you know, the last few minutes now. So just really summarising what we've talked about. So yeah, I think themes that we've had. It's about really being razor sharp with what sort of data you're looking at and looking at what's happening right now. Hilary, some of your examples there around that customer profile, looking at it in such detail to understand who are they now and what do they want, I think were fantastic. And then how have we altered our businesses? What sort of changes have we had to make and how quickly we had to make them? And yeah, Emily, your examples are for a startup specifically about really looking at it in such a challenging period and actually taking advantage of that to grow in the way that you have. Thank you. That's our last few words from us. So what we'll do now is everyone will get a follow-up to this with the slides, so you can share that with any colleagues. But yeah, I'd just like to take this time to thank everyone for joining, and thanks again to the panel for sharing all of your insights. It's been really good joining with you.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.